All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. We've got a lot of really exciting things for this evening, and so if folks join a little bit later, that's no problem. Um, Again, my name is Helen Meyer, and I'm the Development Director at Pine Tree Legal Assistance. And this is a Zoom webinar, so only presenters have video on and everyone else is muted. And I'm so excited to welcome everyone to Cocktails and Conversation, a fun twist on our Coffee and Conversation series from 2020. We have a great lineup for you this evening. For starters, we'll hear a year-end wrap-up from our fearless leader, Nan Heald. Then we are going to turn it over to our amazing staff attorney, Matt Dyer from our Presque Isle office, who will walk us through mixing up some cocktails and mocktails. Everyone should have received the ingredients in advance, and we will share the list in the chat as well. Then you can kick back, enjoy your drink, and listen to some of our favorite stories from 2020. We'll hear from Melissa Martin, Connor Corey, and Erica Veazey. Then we'll wrap things up with some reflections on the year from our Director of Intake, Maureen Boston. I will be monitoring the chat for questions, so feel free to ask them there. And with that, Nan, I think we'll turn it over to you and you can get us started.
All right. Thanks, Helen. It's a little daunting. I have 10 minutes to gallop through all of 2020, and Helen has been very strict with me about the importance of doing that. So I've been working hard to try and do this very quickly. And it's been a good exercise to think about how quickly our normal life changed and COVID started and everything changed in March. We had about 2 weeks, I would say, in March when we had to completely change how we function as Maine's oldest, largest statewide legal aid provider. We closed our offices, we sent our staff home, we notified the public, we expanded our telephone intake hours. We somehow managed to get our technology so that people could actually work from home and get email and phone calls. We figured out that we still had to have human beings deal with the mail that physically came into our offices every day in floods. We had to monitor ongoing court responsibilities. And I think it's worth remembering that while some people thought courts just stopped immediately in March when this happened, that actually wasn't true. Our family law attorneys in particular were still going to court to deal with domestic violence and sexual assault. And then we had a number of staff, including some on our Zoom today, who ended up having to go to court for emergency orders because bad actors were being bad, and we had to go to court to stop them from doing those things. We started monitoring how to manage staff and work appropriately during COVID. We got a lot of great information from the state, from the CDC, and from Maine law firms that were very generous in sharing that information. We decided for the first time to advertise our intake numbers and hours in newspapers in rural Maine because we were concerned that people who didn't have good broadband wouldn't be able to find us when we weren't physically in a place. We started to reopen the offices back in June, but on a very limited basis and with very strict rules in place on how to do that. And we're still operating in a pretty limited way physically in the office, although I'm here because I have such terrible internet service at my house. We have been able to use technology to each other every day. And I think those informal gatherings, a little bit like this one, have been really important for a program that's used to depending on each other for support and advice. There've been a lot of challenges with the partners that we would usually engage with at Pine Tree. Ordinarily, in the spring, I would be talking to legislators and funders, and staff would be talking to client community groups and social service agencies to make sure that they knew what kinds of cases Pine Tree's taking and how to refer people to us. That obviously couldn't happen. So instead, we relied on a new newsletter that Helen and her team helped put together. We put a ton of information on our websites, and staff started talking to people on the phone the old-fashioned way. And that worked, but we are hoping, I think it's fair to say, that we can someday get back to the new norm, to the old normal, and start talking with folks in person in 21. I'm very dependent on talking to my counterparts in the other legal aid programs in New England and around the country. And we were actually scheduled in 2020 to host 2 in-person meetings of all of the New England project directors in Maine. That didn't happen. We did have a Zoom for the group just a couple of weeks ago, and it was wonderful to hear and see from people, but it also gave me such an appreciation for Pine Tree, because some of my counterparts in New England, they literally had to stop. They did not have the technology to allow them to work from home. It was a terrible, terrible situation for them. So I feel really lucky that we have a great IT team at Pine Tree, and that our staff were well suited to managing this particular challenge. There were some advantages to the change. I'm a member of a national task force that the Legal Services Corporation created on veteran services, which was originally going to have lots of fun plane rides around the country to go to different places and meet with important people to hear about veteran services. That didn't happen. The advantage was that having these meetings by Zoom meant that many more people were able to participate in those conversations. And so we had members of Congress and people from the VA and people from the court system that has supported veterans in different parts of the country. And it ended up being, I think, a much better process because of all of that engagement. And I will keep you all posted on the report, which is due in March of 21. And then, of course, a lot of new funding came about, which Helen and her team were very well poised to take advantage of. But United Ways in Maine, Maine Foundations were incredibly important in allowing us to adapt to these circumstances, both from an internal purpose standpoint and for clients. And I will say that we, if any of you read the Portland Press Herald article on the PPP program, you will know that Pine Tree got a really wonderful payday protection program loan of over $740,000 to support our services this year, which really we could not have functioned without that. And I am extremely pleased to say that that loan was forgiven yesterday. So we can count on that money. I know, it's really pretty great. Every year we have somewhat of a changing group of staff involved with our program. It used to be the case that Pine Tree staff, when I started at Pine Tree in 1985, everybody had already been at Pine Tree a long time, and then nobody ever left. And so we never had new people join the program, and we were just all getting a lot of experience together. We're a different program now. That's just a reality, partly as a result of retirements of old geezers like me, and partly because we have new funding that allows us to expand our staff into different areas. So this year, right now, at this moment in time, by the end of the year, we will have 62 people on Pine Tree staff, and that includes 41 lawyers, which makes us one of Maine's larger law firms from that standpoint. We have had really an incredible applicant pool for the last several years, and that was true this year as well. Whether it was for attorney positions or paralegal positions or administrative positions. The average experience level of our attorneys right now is 7 years, which makes them eligible for partner in most Portland, Maine law firms. So we're just really lucky that we change, but we really have continued to be very strong in all the ways that a program that serves as many people as Pine Tree serves needs to be. We also had really good luck this year with law summer law students and interns, which again, you might not think during a pandemic is even a thing that could happen. But we ended up having, I think, 12 law students assigned to different parts of Pine Tree in the summer. Some of them, of course, never physically got to the border of Maine, but they were still able to do great work, research and writing and client communication, and learn from our staff and get energized about working in public service. And I'm sure the same will be true this year too. And that's really important to us as a way to expand our services. We've also put a lot of time and energy this year into expanding our pro bono pool of attorneys and other professionals. And I will just make a large, loud pitch to any of you who are attorneys or professionals on this call who aren't already involved with Pine Tree. Because as you know, 2021 is going to be a tough year. January is going to be a tough month for our clients, and anyone that has capacity to offer their support as a litigator or an attorney or a tax consultant or a translator or a fill in the blank, please get in touch with us, because we really can use that support. I want to also do a shout out for everybody that is at Pine Tree on a staff standpoint. I think we've seen every day stories about how tough it is to manage the life-work balance when you are trying to do your job during the day while you have children and pets and parents and relatives who are looking to you for support, or your partner or spouse is also trying to work from home. And you're both fighting over who gets control of the computer. I have to say, our staff have just done an amazing job in being able to adapt to those changes. And some folks have had really, really tough personal circumstances, and yet they still are able to focus on their work and do great things for our clients. They've continued to work with the other legal aid providers in Maine and with victim advocacy organizations and social service agencies to manage what we'd call a warm referral, which is when somebody's working with another agency who can tell that that person really needs legal help, and they do their best to get them right to our front door so that we can provide support to that individual with whatever their problem might be. And we've also done a lot of work, as you may know. It feels like the laws regarding legal protections and certainly state court procedures have changed, maybe not on a weekly basis, but it sometimes feels that way. And staff have done an amazing job of monitoring those changes and sharing that information with other people and putting it on our websites and making sure that our clients know and complying with all of those changes, in addition to their regular jobs. And then, the consequence of that, which I really only appreciated recently talking to one of the staff attorneys in Portland, is that it used to be the case that if you were assigned to cover courts in a particular county, you could pretty predictably know when you were going to court, let's say Monday afternoon or Thursday morning, and you could work your whole schedule around that knowledge. Now, right now, as many of the lawyers will know, you may end up with a telephone conference in a case on one day, and then a mediation, which happens by Zoom or some other technology on a different day of the week. And then you still may have to go to court for an in-court appearance on a third day of the week. And it's unpredictable. And you cannot assume that what applies this week is going to be relevant next week. So it's making it really difficult for staff to figure out when and how they can get caught up on their paperwork and their other challenges. And it's made it hard for people to take vacations. We are trying very hard to make sure that all people affiliated with Pine Tree are taking their vacations this month, because we know they need to get rested and refreshed for what's going to be the ongoing tsunami in January. I guess I wanted to close just by sharing something that just happened today. We have Pine Tree, as with all employers, we have contracts with people who come in and clean our offices. And the Portland office is the largest office. And so we have someone who has been the cleaner in the Portland office 3 days a week for almost 9 years. And he, you know, he comes in and we've seen him, and many of us end up working longer hours or on the weekends. So we might see him in the office if we were here in normal circumstances. So we've gotten to know Harry a little bit. He's a veteran, he's a dad, his children go to St. Joe's College in Standish. So we have a really nice relationship with him. Anyway, I didn't know this, but he's retiring on Saturday. And he left us a note, and he said in his note, "Pine Tree Legal was without a doubt my favorite account to clean. You and your staff have been so kind and friendly to me over the years, and I will miss seeing all your faces." And, you know, I don't think that many cleaners are leaving those kinds of notes for the places where they end up spending some time. I think it reflects the core values that are really important at Pine Tree that we post on our website. And I think it's one of the reasons we've been able to navigate through what has been rough waters, I think it's fair to say, in 2020. And I think it's what will get us through to smoother sailing in 21.
Thank you, Nan. That was wonderful. And that was such a beautiful note from Harry. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so let's turn it over to Matt Dyer from our Presque Isle office to walk us through mixing up some cocktails and mocktails. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Matt before, Matt is a true Pine Tree treasure. And I have to say, his wisdom and wit and compassion and the emails that he's written to staff this year have really helped keep us connected through the pandemic. And he's just a fabulous colleague to work with. And I'm really happy to have him join us tonight. Everyone should have received the ingredients for cocktails or mocktails, whichever you prefer, in advance, but I've also shared them in the chat. So please go ahead and take a look there and take it away, Matt.
Okay. Can you guys see me and everything? I have no idea.
No, we are looking at your door.
You what?
We're looking at the door, so I think you might need to turn the camera around.
How do I, it's pointing the wrong way. Is there a way to?
I think there's like a button that should have like, it's kind of like a half circle with some arrows on it.
Well, let's try that.
That's it. Oh wait, no, you have to hit that button again.
I'm gonna have to hit it again.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, there we go. We can see you now. Great. And
Well,
just what a perfect example of 2020.
Perfect example.
The technology.
Well, people, thanks for tuning in to the Pine Tree Legal virtual Zoom cocktail hour. So listen, I think I got this job because I made up a cocktail this summer called the Nan Healder, but a secret ingredient was rhubarb sauce, and it's not in season now. So we're gonna make a Manhattan and a Roy Rogers, but kind of my style, because, well, I don't like maraschino cherries. So, and they're traditional in both those drinks, but I use a twist of orange because the maraschino cherries are just too nuclear for me. So anyway, get your cocktail shaker. This one's special. And so you need to put in some ice. I'm using a bean pot for my ice maker, or my ice holder. I don't usually do that, but it's the only thing I had handy. So put a lot of ice into your shaker. For a Manhattan, I use bourbon. You can use rye whiskey or any kind of whiskey. I guess I wouldn't do scotch, but you could, I suppose. I like them strong, so I'm going to do 2 jiggers of bourbon. And Then we call this a perfect martini. And a bartender in Boston tuned me in on that. Gene and I were down there for a Hot Tuna concert, and we went to a fancy bar and ordered Manhattans. So the perfect part is you do half white vermouth and half red with 1 jigger. You put that in. Anyway, so we're sitting there in this bar drinking Manhattans. He gave us a perfect Manhattan. We didn't know that. And we were chit-chatting, and he was a very kind of debonair guy. Oh, bitters, a couple of shakes of bitters, which are gentian root. Anyway, so this bartender finally walks over and he leans on the bar and he looks and he says, "Where are you people from?" And we said, "Well, Maine." He said, "Of course you are." So I put all that liquor in with the ice in my shaker. So it's 2 jiggers of bourbon, half a jigger of white vermouth, half a jigger of red, dash of bitters. Let it kind of cool off a little bit. Instead of the cherry, I use an orange peel garnish. And you just peel it with your vegetable peeler. You want to not get the white stuff if you can help it. I like to break it up a little bit into the glass. I'm drinking out of a coupe. Yes, it is.
Matt,
I've got a history.
where did you get the polar bear shaker?
Someone got it for me for Christmas right after it happened.
That's fantastic.
You know, I have polar bear everything, okay? So then strain it. Now a cocktail shaker has a strainer. If you don't have a cocktail shaker, just use a big glass like this and strain it out with something. Who's that?
She heard mention of the polar bear and wanted to come see.
Oh, so there is your perfect Manhattan with orange instead of cherry. If you like those cherries, by all means use them. But, oh, it's good. Well, that is just what the doctor ordered. And I'm not a doctor. But anyway, so let's make a Roy Rogers. So I have an uncle who is a 77-year-old gay guy right out of Central Casting. He's like, think about Liberace. That's my Uncle Ron. So he was telling me once, he's a lot of fun. He was telling me he got invited to a party. This was in New York City back, before the whole AIDS thing. And he got invited to a party, but it was a cowboy party. So everyone had to dress up like a cowboy. So he said he did. He got dressed up and he went and he knocked on the door. And someone opened the door and they looked and they said, "Oh, sweetie, who invited Dale Evans?" And if you don't know, that was Roy Rogers' girl sidekick. So we'll make a Roy Rogers. And Roy Rogers was a cowboy singer, actor from, I don't know, the 40s. So a lot of you guys probably don't know, but you should know. So a Roy Rogers is ice, cola. It's very simple. Instead of bitters, the old recipe is called for grenadine, which nowadays is like, it's like those cherries. It's nasty sugar crap. But a substitute is pomegranate juice, which you can get. And it says right on it, wonderful antioxidant superpower. So that'll, why not? Why not have two? So a little splash of your pomegranate juice into your cola. Again, make a nice twist of your orange peel. Kind of crunch it up to break up some of those oils. Put her in. Give it a stir. And you've got a rockin' mocktail with a history. Any questions?
I'm not taking questions, but that was delicious. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Well, listen, that's the cocktail hour. I hope everyone's enjoying their cocktail or mocktail. And with that, I'll turn it over to whoever.
Great. All right. Well, I think now we can all just sit back, enjoy our cocktail or mocktail, and hear some stories from 2020. We've got a great team here to regale you all with some of our stories, favorite stories from the year. I think we'll start off with Melissa Martin. Melissa is a staff attorney in our family law and victim rights unit, and she serves clients in York County. Melissa, go ahead and take it.
So I want to share a story that is both very 2020, but also talks about some larger issues that our domestic violence and sexual assault survivor clients face. So I want to talk about a client I represented this year, and I'm going to call her C. At the beginning of the pandemic, she was out of work and out of housing and ended up moving in with the father of her then 1-year-old child in New Hampshire for a couple of months. He ended up being abusive to her. He at one point strangled her. And so she fled back to Maine in May and sought a protection from abuse order in the Portland District Court. She was granted a temporary order, but the father of her child, persuaded her to drop the order, told her everything would be fine, that he wouldn't be abusive to her anymore. And so she ended up dismissing her protection order. And of course, things were not fine. He immediately filed a child custody petition in the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire has a process that's somewhat different from Maine, and so he was allowed and was granted an ex parte order, which means that there was no hearing in New Hampshire. He simply made some statements about why he felt like the child should be with him, and was granted an ex parte order giving him custody of the child. The New Hampshire court, of course, was totally unaware that not only did she have the temporary protection order in Maine in 2020, she had actually been granted another order after a final hearing in 2019 that found that the father had abused both my client and the child when the child was very young. So there was this whole history that the New Hampshire court was totally unaware of, granted him temporary custody, came to the child's daycare in Maine, picked up the child, and my client didn't have contact with the child for several weeks. This was, of course, terrifying for her. She didn't feel that her child was safe. She didn't know where the child was. It was just an incredibly stressful situation. She was connected to Pine Tree, and this is always a stressful situation when a client has a court case pending in another state, because we are licensed attorneys in Maine. We're somewhat limited in what we can do in New Hampshire. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I really like these interstate custody issues. And so this was an opportunity for me to try to file a case in Maine, which is where, according to, there's a Uniform Custody, Child Custody Jurisdiction Act that applies in 49 out of 50 states, every state except Massachusetts. And to get to utilize that process to file some motions in Maine and get an interstate conference between the judges heard. And we were able to get the case transferred back to Maine, which is where it should have appropriately been. We were able to get her primary residence, so the child is back with her in Maine, back in the daycare that has sort of supported him, that she's consistently used. So a really happy ending. And I think part of what is so amazing about this case is that all of it happened remotely. So every hearing in this case, every conference in this case, even my meetings with the client have all happened over video or over the phone. So it's been really rewarding to get to, as Nan had mentioned, those of us in family in court, partially in person, but it is also really rewarding to see that we can be effective advocates even when we are representing people remotely, and even when we are in these video hearings, and we can do challenging and complicated cases even when we have to do them remotely.
Thank you, Melissa. That was really moving. I'm so glad you are out there as a self-described nerd on these issues, working with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. We did have a question from someone in the audience that's related to this question, and that is, are you aware of reunification therapy? Looks like you are, so maybe I'll let you just answer that and also share with everybody what that is.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the question, and the question looks like there's a lot of layers to it. So it is interesting. I'm actually doing, because I'm so interested in these issues, I think there's a reunification therapy issue, and then there's sort of this issue of all of the complicated legal issues that can come up when you have interstate custody cases. And so one thing that's really amazing, some of the family law attorneys right now are actually taking part in a 2-day ABA training of civil legal attorneys who, again, it's happening all over Zoom, that's for sexual assault and domestic violence attorneys around the country, to sort of figure out how to use this Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act. Was meant originally, one of the purposes is to help domestic violence survivors. And so we're doing this really intensive training to try to make sure that we are making the best arguments. It sounds like in the situation that you're bringing up, there's some sort of order about taking the child away for a period of time. So one of the things that we're really working on as a unit is making sure that we have the expertise to be able to deal with these situations when they come up. I would say where we see reunification therapy is we see that ordered in a lot of our cases involving domestic violence, and we're really lucky. I'm talking about community partners in Maine. We're really lucky because there are some mental health providers in Maine who are able to do that in a way that sounds like it's a lot more trauma informed than the situation that you seem to be referencing. So I think that also, seeing that done effectively, which I think can happen sometimes, is really, us again learning from the experts in the mental health field, which we have close relationships with, and bringing them in to testify in our cases or to work with our clients.
Thank you, Melissa. And Jay, I hope that answered your question. And of course, feel free to reach out to me or Nan if you wanted to talk to one of us, our advocates, more about that. All right, well, thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing that story. Now we'll turn it over to Connor Corey, who is a staff attorney with Kids Legal, our children's rights project. Connor is one of the amazing attorneys referenced by Nan who joined us this year. He started with us in May, and so has only known Pine Tree in its current remote work setup. But nonetheless, he has jumped into his work and represented children, youth, and their parents around the state. He's handled cases from York County to Washington County and in between. And I will turn it over to you, Connor. Connor, I cannot hear you very well. Nope, that is not working. All right, we're going to give you a few minutes to work on, don't worry about it, to work on your audio. This just feels sort of perfect for a wrap-up event for the year of 2020, not being able to connect with someone on Zoom. So I think we're going to turn over to Erica now. Erica is another one of our amazing superstar attorneys. I couldn't say enough good things about Erica. She's the directing attorney in our Bangor office, and she also oversees or supervises our low-income taxpayer clinic and our New England Regional Farm Worker Project. So with that, Erica, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Helen. So I'm going to tell you about a case that I think is a really good example of how sometimes housing and consumer issues can all get mixed up together. And it's also a great example of how we sometimes use pro bono attorneys in the private bar or volunteer attorneys to help us do more than we'd be able to do just on our own. So we had a client who came into our office. This was obviously pre-shutdown, back when we still had clients come in during walk-in hours. And she came in the office in tears, and she had an eviction notice with her. And she was a single mother of a autistic son. And she'd been renting, apartments and homes over the years. And she talked about how her son had always struggled with a lot of anxiety and agitation in these sort of bigger spaces like an apartment or a house would be. And so she'd always had her eyes peeled for another kind of opportunity, for another place for them to live. And so she found on Facebook an advertisement for a tiny house. And this was actually called a Hobbit house. And she thought it might be absolutely perfect for them. And so she contacted the seller, and she entered into this contract to buy this Hobbit house. And it was in a mobile home park. And, as certainly can happen sometimes when two people who aren't lawyers try to write contracts that need to be, complex documents, sometimes they're not written perfectly. And this might have been one of those situations. But, they wrote a contract, they made a deal about how much she was going to pay to buy this Hobbit house. And in the meantime, her and her son moved in. And she talked about how this Hobbit house was almost, she called it was like a weighted blanket for her little boy. It reduced his anxiety and his agitation because they were in this really small, confined space. And she felt like she had, found this perfect living situation for herself and her child. And so she had this contract, and she had to pay a certain amount, and she really scrimped and struggled and pulled all the money together. But over the course of about 2 years, she paid the total amount that was due in the contract. And she bought her Hobbit house for her son and herself. And she approached the seller to get a bill of sale so that she would have sort of her final document showing this was really hers. And when she said to him, "Okay, I've paid you everything in the contract," the seller said to her, "No, you've got to give me $3,000 more." And she was like, what are you talking about? He said, "Yeah, I'm not going to give you a bill of sale till you give me $3,000 more." And when she refused to give him that money, he gave her an eviction notice and said, "I'm going to throw you out of this house." So she wound up in our office in tears, thinking she was going to lose this Hobbit house that she'd bought for her son and herself. And so the first thing we did is we took a look at all the contracts, and she was right. I mean, they weren't perfect contracts, but she had, we thought, paid him everything that was owed under this contract, and the Hobbit house really should be hers. And so we got in touch with the seller and told him, "You've got to issue a bill of sale. And if you try to evict her from this place, we are going to defend that case, to the very end, because you cannot kick her out of this home. She bought this home from you." And in the course of dealing with the seller, who wasn't very happy to hear from us, we actually discovered that, in fact, he didn't own the Hobbit house himself. He was buying the Hobbit house from the company that builds the Hobbit houses. And he had not been giving the Hobbit house building company, all the payments she'd been making. So he was behind on his contract. And that's why he demanded all this extra money from her, because his little house of cards was starting to crumble down. And in the course of sort of investigating all of this, we discovered that this Hobbit house building company was in the process of trying to repossess the Hobbit house from him because he'd fallen behind in his contract. And so we did an end run around the seller, and we talked to the company building the Hobbit houses, and we negotiated an agreement with them for her to pay off the remaining balance that was due on this contract between the guy selling her the house and the Hobbit house company. And, it required her to make a bunch of extra payments, but we worked out an agreement. She made monthly payments, and they didn't try to repossess the house during that time. And at the end of the contract, they issued her a letter saying the contract had been paid in full. And so, we stopped the eviction. We kept her in the house, but of course she wasn't made whole yet because now she'd had gone and paid all this extra money to this Hobbit House building company. And so one of our great volunteer attorneys in our Augusta office, Jim McKenna, agreed to do a case for her. And so now he's in the process of filing an Unfair Trade Practices Act case against that seller to try to recoup all the extra money that she had to pay and damages and get her that bill of sale so that she not only has the house, she knows it's hers, and she's compensated for everything that she was put through. And so that's how we can do stuff. And then we have these volunteer attorneys who can help us go the extra mile and really make clients whole. And this is something that, if she hadn't wandered into our offices, I don't know how else she would have solved this, and maybe she would have wound up homeless. So we were really glad that we've been able to help her with this.
Erica, thank you so much. That is an incredible story. Really, really heartwarming. And I'm so thankful for you and our team, and of course for Jim McKenna, our amazing volunteer attorney. Wow. Thank you. All right, well, I think we've got Connor's audio. Good luck following Erica's amazing story, Connor.
Okay, let's test this out. Can y'all hear me? Awesome. Okay, so that was all intentional, just to sort of demonstrate the difficulties of remote work. So really excited to be here. As Helen was saying, I'm pretty new to the team. I think I'm the newest person here. And in the kids legal unit, we take on a variety of cases for low-income children and their caregivers throughout the state. So the case that I'm going to share about is at the intersection of special education law and school discipline. And as Melissa did, for the sake of sharing this case anonymously, I'll call the student Eric. So Eric's a 17-year-old, and he's an extremely thoughtful kid with a real interest in and real knack for computers, everything having to do with programming, with gaming, and a super sweet kid. He's got a range of disabilities, including being on the autism spectrum. He's got obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, and he's been identified for special education services throughout almost the entirety of his public education, time in public education. And so about a year ago, in early January of 2020, Eric is alleged to have been involved in engaging in verbally threatening behavior towards another classmate. Can everybody still hear me? Just checking. Okay, great. So the threatening behavior that Eric was alleged to have engaged in was towards some kids who'd been bullying Eric over the course of years. Eric had tried to make complaints to the school did nothing. And so at this instance in early January of last year, Eric blurted out these alleged threats. This resulted in a 10-day suspension, out of school suspension for Eric. And then the school wanted to push it even further. And so they decided that they were going to pursue expulsion for Eric. And under the law is very clear on this issue. If a child is identified with special education needs, the school cannot just move forward with an expulsion as it would for a child who's not identified with special education. And instead, they first have to conduct a very specific meeting. And the meeting is called a manifestation determination review. And at that meeting, they get together and as a team, including the parents, they look at this child's alleged conduct that was at issue in the disciplinary action, and they determine whether his conduct was related to his disability. Did his alleged threats, was that a manifestation of his disability? So the school followed the letter of the law. They conducted the manifestation determination review, and the outcome was very clear. Eric's behavior on the day in question was clearly a manifestation of his disability, and they determined that after looking at his record, his verbal threats were clearly part of the symptoms of his disabilities. So where the school kind of went awry, after conducting the manifestation determination, saying, yep, this was definitely related to his disability, What they should have done was then allow Eric back into school and support Eric. Make sure that Eric had the necessary behavioral supports to thrive, to be able to engage in his learning environment and stay on track behaviorally as well. Instead, what they did was, instead of pursuing the legal expulsion route, they decided to pursue what ended up being a de facto expulsion. So by the time that we got involved, Eric had been out of school for an entire semester. So what the school had done was told Eric that he was prohibited from entering school grounds while they conducted a risk assessment and determined just how severe of a risk he posed to the school environment. They suspended all specially designed instruction for Eric, but this is a kid with pretty severe academic needs. So he was no longer receiving any classes. He was no longer receiving any emotional supports or social emotional supports. And so when we got involved, we brought a due process hearing with the Maine Department of Education, alleging that the school had violated the federal law protecting schools with students with disabilities. Thankfully, it was a pretty clear-cut violation of the federal law as well as the state law protecting kids with disabilities. So it did result in a favorable decision or settlement for our client. And as I mentioned earlier, Eric is very, very interested in computers, and he's really talented at computers and programming. So he plans on attending a summer camp next summer, utilizing the settlement funds to be able to learn how to build his own computer. And he's also working on setting up some tutoring on computer programming as well, so that he can start to set a path for himself for a career in that route. And so some other folks were talking about the pro bono work in our pro bono team. And within the Kids Legal Unit, there's just ample opportunities for folks that have legal background to get involved at various juncture points that I just mentioned. There's manifestation determination reviews whenever a kid with a disability is threatened with expulsion. Having a lawyer at those meetings is critical and makes a huge impact and can oftentimes be the difference between a kid being expelled for indefinitely, frankly, or being allowed to go back into school with more support. At expulsion hearings in front of school boards, to be able to represent a child to hopefully avoid expulsion. If a child is expelled, helping us represent kids at reentry hearings to get them back into school. And then if needed, assisting us in representing folks in dispute resolution matters before the Department of Education. So we've got ample cases, and we'd be really excited to work with folks that are interested in this area of law.
Thank you, Connor. That is another amazing story. So thank you so much. I feel like listening to all these stories, maybe a new fundraising plan, we could sell some of these to the Hallmark Movie Channel and try to raise money for a few more staff attorneys. I'm just kidding, of course. We would never do that. But these are really heartwarming stories. And I really appreciate you guys sharing them. Before we move on, we had a question that somebody asked. She had to leave, but I did want to answer the question just because it was a really good one. So we had a question from Denise Tepler. She said, Maine Banking Association reported to Senator Sanborn and I that they are not seeing a large number of mortgage payment defaults and are not expecting an unusually large number of foreclosures. What are you hearing? Do you expect a foreclosure tsunami? And so I did just want to provide an answer from one of our staff attorneys who handles foreclosure cases, that the Maine bankers are only a slice of the market. And the vast majority of mortgages are not serviced by the local banks, but rather national mortgage servicers. We are hearing that the national data supports that there will be a massive foreclosure problem if there is no more COVID relief provided. And the other thing I just want to mention is that foreclosure is one of the topics we haven't been able to cover yet in our Coffee and Conversation series. And I'm expecting that we'll cover that topic going in 2020. So if anyone else is interested in hearing more about that, just read our newsletters and emails and you'll hear more from us on that next year. All right, with that, we're running a little bit low on time, so I want to turn things over to Maureen Boston, our Director of Intake, who is going to provide some of her reflections on 2020. Maureen has a really unique perspective in her role as the Director of Intake because she sees requests as they come in, she closes a lot of cases, she's active in our training programs and our supervision team. So she's got a great perspective. So Maureen, I look forward to hearing from you and thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Helen. I am truly really grateful to be here tonight on this cold and dark December night, and I am demonstrating the weird Zoom lighting that can happen sometimes that we've all experienced in 2020 this evening. But this year, it feels like being here and getting here and is an accomplishment in and of itself. And thank you all for joining us and also for the support you've each shown Pine Tree by being here tonight and supporting us over the past year. Whether you're a staff member, a board member, a friend in the Maine legal community, a social service provider, or a champion of social justice in some other way. Knowing that we haven't been standing alone during everything that 2020 has brought us is very much appreciated. The stories you've heard tonight are great examples of the work that we've been doing over the past year. There has definitely been chaos. There's been new emergency rules, overnight closures, changing procedures that Nan talked a little bit about too. And sometimes these things happen with really little warning and they left us in the position where we had to immediately be able to explain how these new rules affected our clients and also act accordingly to make sure that we are protecting their legal rights. The challenges of low-income Mainers over the past year have also intensified. Domestic violence victims were ordered to stay at home with their perpetrators. Children needing IEPs were homeschooling. Long waits for unemployment benefits were happening due to the large number of applicants, even when applications were being approved. And there have been increased evictions in a landlord's market. It's really easy, I think, for all of us that work at Pine Tree to get bogged down in the weight of all of these problems and the daunting tasks of trying to address the inequalities of society, in concern over the virus, and in waiting to hear if there's going to be any further relief for the people that we serve. I know my coworkers are tired, and all of these people tonight spoke and they sound like they have so much energy and they're doing great work, and they do, but they're also really good at hiding how exhausted the past year has made us. And we are constantly plagued by the knowledge that there is always more work to do, which it's really hard then to avoid feeling like we're not doing enough. But in the devastation of this year, during which we've seen so many challenges, we really need to allow ourselves to feel some pride. We are here, just like we were here on December 10th, 2019. Our doors are closed to the public, but we fielded 5,939 calls on call center alone, which are updated through this morning. We are limiting the number of people on staff who can be in each office at one time, but collectively as an organization, the Pine Tree staff has worked over 100,000 hours in 2020. We're appearing in court over the phone and on video. For some people, they did this during personal quarantines. But we have appeared in over 900 court cases in every district court in the state. And that's even with there being significant court reductions from March to August, which was a good portion of the year. We're still at the table giving input to important people who are making decisions that affect low-income Mainers. The table is now a Zoom screen and we attend from weird places in our homes while trying to keep homeschooling children out of sight. But we've been grateful to be invited to those conversations and to have the opportunity to give suggestions about COVID court proceedings, about electronic court records, consumer protection, protections for victims of intimate partner violence, and so many more issues. We should feel proud that access to justice has not ended because of this global crisis. We should feel proud because we've been able to stand as enforcers of all these emergency rules that were put into place to protect people from the rippling effects of the damage of the virus. People say the CDC eviction ban, just as one example, was enough. But the reality is that laws are meaningless unless there are lawyers to argue that they should be enforced. We should feel proud that we've maintained our focus on our mission. And we want to share that pride with all of you and so many more people who weren't able to join us today, because we couldn't do what we do without support. We need people out there who understand that we can't do this work without financial backing. And we need people out there who are spreading the message out in the community, reminding society that legal aid for low-income people matters, and telling us also that our work is meaningful and letting us know we're not alone. So I want to leave you with a really simple promise for 2021, and that is that Pine Tree Legal isn't going anywhere. We are Washington County, always there to greet the country's first sunrise. We are snow in the Oxford Hills, guaranteed to come each winter. We're Portland Headlight, protecting people from the rocky shore. We're the wilderness of the county, steadfastly unchanged as modern society goes haywire. We don't know what 2021 will bring, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that 2020 taught us. But the smart, hardworking people I'm lucky to work with each day are going to keep on working, keep finding new problems to solve, keep finding injustice to fight. And we thank each and every one of you for joining us on that journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maureen. That was outstanding, truly amazing. You put into very eloquent words so much of what I feel about Pine Tree and the people I work with. It has been fantastic to hear your stories tonight, and I just want to really thank you all for joining us. I know it's almost 6 o'clock and we want people to get home and have the opportunity to get off Zoom for the day and spend time with your families. But really quickly, I just want to remind everyone, please share the information on our website. As Maureen said, the laws are only effective if people know their rights and there are people out there enforcing them. So please share the information that we've put together on our website and on social media with your networks. We also want to invite people to volunteer with us, especially Maine lawyers. We heard a really great example from Erica of one of our pro bono attorneys, Jim McKenna, doing a case which would hopefully allow one of our clients to get back some of the money that she had to spend when somebody deceived her. And we can't do those types of cases without volunteers. So we really encourage anyone who is able to volunteer with us. So feel free to contact us. There's information on our website about volunteering. We also, of course, couldn't do this work if we didn't have funding to pay our staff. So please consider making a donation to Pine Tree. And if you're a member of the Maine Bar, we hope that you will make your contribution instead to the Campaign for Justice, which is a joint campaign that raises money for all Maine's legal